Today we're going to talk about factoring by grouping and factoring trinomials. As a quick review, we're going to factor some numbers. Let me get my pen set up. There we go. 56, if we want to prime factor that, that's 2 times 28, which is 2 times 14, which is 2 times 7. So 56 is equal to 2 to the third power, because there's 3 2's, times 7. One way to check and make sure if we factored correctly is remultiply. So that's 2 to the third, which is 8. So 8 times 7 is indeed 56. So when we factor, we find 2 or more numbers that multiply together to get the number we started with. Let's try 75. 75 is 3 times 25. 25 is 5 times 5. So 75 is 3 times 5 squared. Checking. We have 3 times 5 squared, which is 25. 3 times 25 is indeed 75, so it checked out correctly. Another review we want to do quick is multiplying. Remember, multiplying two binomials, x plus 4 times x minus 5, we have to multiply all 4 terms together. So we have x times x, which is x squared, x times negative 5, which is minus 5x, 4 times x, which would be 4x, and 4 times negative 5 would be minus 20. Combining like terms, we have x squared minus x minus 20. Looking at x squared minus x minus 20, the two things that multiply to get that are x plus 4 times x minus 5. Remember, if it's in parentheses, it's one number. So there's two numbers that multiply together to get x squared minus x minus 20. Therefore, x squared minus x minus 20 factors into x plus 4 times x minus 5. Methods of factoring. The first thing you always have to do is factor out a GCF first, if possible, and a negative if the leading coefficient, the first the first thing that's multiplied to the x squared term, is negative. You want to factor out a negative. There's many different methods to factoring. You need to pick the one that works best for you in given situations. If there's 4 terms, if there's 4 things added together, you have to factor by grouping. If there's 3 terms, you can factor by guess and check. I'm not going to cover guess and check. This is one of the ones that most people have seen, and it's also one of the ones that tends to be the most difficult. So we're not going to cover this one. If you know how to factor by guess and check, feel free to do so. Notice one of the key words for guess and check is actually check. So although you're required to check all your answers with all of these, guess and check, you also need to check. You can also factor by the AC method, by the tic-tac-toe method, and I'll show you a couple of the box methods, but the box method kind of goes with the guess and check method. Those are ones that you can work out yourself also. If there's 2 terms, so only 2 things added or subtracted together, typically you're going to use special formulas. You have the difference of squares formula, and you also have the sum and difference of cubes formula. Those we'll go over in the next section. And then, like I said before, always check all your answers when you're done. So let's factor by grouping first. Factor by grouping means we're going to look at the first two terms, and then we're going to look at the second two terms. We're going to group the first two terms together, and then we're going to group the second two terms together. So by grouping the first two terms together, we have 5y cubed minus 4y squared. Looking at those two and doing what we did from the last section, we can take a y squared, we can factor a y squared out of both terms, and we have 5y minus 4. Now grouping the second two terms together, we have 25y minus 20. Looking at those two, we can factor 5 out of both of those, and again we have 5y minus 4. So coming back here, we have 5y cubed minus 4y squared. We said that equaled y squared times 5y minus 4, so we'll write that here. Plus, we have 25y minus 20. We said that equaled 5 times 5y minus 4, so we'll write that next. Now we can either combine like terms, factor out the 5y minus 4. This is something we've seen in 2.1, in 2.2, and in 2.4. So when we factor this out, we finally get y squared plus 5 times 5y minus 4. Checking our answer. We have y squared plus 5 times 5y minus 4. We get y squared times 5y is 5y cubed. Y squared times minus 4 is minus 4y squared. 5 times 5y is plus 25y, and 5 times minus 4 is minus 20. This is the same as this, so 5y cubed minus 4y squared plus 5y minus 20 factors into y squared plus 5 times y minus 5y minus 4. This second problem, we'll take the 15ab minus 5a minus 21b plus 7. We're going to group that again. There's 4 terms, so we're going to look at the 15ab minus 5a. From both of these, we can factor out a 5a, and we're left with 3b minus 1. Remember, if this is the same as this, we need that minus 1 in there so we can end up with the right amount of terms. This is actually minus 21b, so we're going to keep that minus there, minus 21b plus 7. This is negative here, so we're going to take a negative out, and then we can also take a 7 out. So we have minus 7 times 3b minus 1. Remember, minus 7 times minus 1 is positive 7. Coming back to the original problem, 15ab minus 5a we know is equal to 5a times 3b minus 1. And minus 21b plus 7 is the same as minus 7 times 3b minus 1. Now we can combine like terms, and we have 5a minus 7 times 3b minus 1. Checking our answer. 5a minus 7 times 3b minus 1. We get 5a times 3b is 15ab. 5a times minus 1 is minus 5a. minus 7 times positive 3b is minus 21b. Minus 7 times minus 1 is plus 7. This, what we just checked, is the same as our original problem. So the original problem factors into 5a minus 7 times 3b minus 1. Next, we're going to factor completely using the AC method, the tic-tac-toe method, and the box method. Like I said before, I'm only going to show the box once or twice, and you can use it from there if you like it. I really like the AC method and the tic-tac-toe method because it works for every case of factoring trinomials that you want to use. The AC method comes from the ax squared plus bx plus c. This is the standard form to write a quadratic equation. We want to do a times c first. And then the second thing you want to do is find the factors of a times c that add to b. This sounds complicated. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done giving the instructions. The third thing you want to do is then, using those factors, split up the middle term and then the last thing is now you're going to have 4 terms you can factor by grouping. So let's go ahead and see how that works with a problem. If you need this again, don't forget to, you can rewind and pause so you can get it. So when it's just x squared, there's an imaginary 1 there. So we're going to take 1 times positive 6 is equal to 6. The factors of 6 that add to negative 5. So the factors of 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. Because this is positive, we're not going to subtract. If it was negative, we would subtract. So right now it's positive. We have 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. 2 and 3, 2 plus 3 add to positive 5, but we need it to add to negative 5, so we're going to have minus 2 and minus 3 add to negative 5, and minus 2 times minus 3 is positive 6. Then our third step said use these two factors to split that middle term. So we have our original is x squared minus 5x plus 6. So we're going to split this middle term into x squared minus 2x from this minus 2 minus 3x from that minus 3 plus 6. We didn't do anything with the first or the last term. Now we can factor by grouping like we did in the previous slide. So these two, the first two terms, we can take an x out and we have x minus 2. The second two, this is minus, so we have to take a minus out. We can take a minus 3 out, and again we have x minus 2. Again, don't forget, minus 3 times minus 2 is positive 6. We need positive 6, so this has to be minus 2. These are now the same, so we can combine like terms, and we have x minus 3 times x minus 2. That's the AC method. The tic-tac-toe method is very similar. The tic-tac-toe method, we want to set up a tic-tac-toe board. The AX term goes here, the c term goes here, and when we do this, these two are going to add ax squared term. These two are going to add to the bx term. When you're determining all these, we want to multiply across this way, and we want to multiply up this way. So let's see that in action. So we have x squared goes here, and 6 goes here, and these two terms that are going to be here have to add to minus 5x. So now we're going to multiply across. So x squared times 6 is 6x squared. And then we want to be able to multiply to 6x squared and add to minus 5x squared. That becomes minus 2x and minus 3x. Minus 2x times minus 3x is positive 6x squared. Minus 2x plus minus 3x is negative 5x. Now we're going to work with our greatest common factors. This, just like when we were multiplying and things like that, this box comes from x squared and minus 2x. The greatest common factor of x squared and minus 2x is x. This one is 6 and minus 2. We need that negative in there, so we're going to put the negative 2 here. This box is x squared and 3x. The greatest common factor of those two is x. And again, 6 and minus 3x, the greatest common factor is minus 3. Our factoring for this ends up being the diagonals. So x minus 3 and x minus 2. Which is actually what we got in the previous example. And the last method is the box method. The box method is just basically putting in the things that you know and figuring out what these should be like we did when we multiplied. You could also use algebra tiles to do this, which you should be able to do in class, and they'll show you how to do that in class if you want to learn that way. This is going to be x squared, and this is going to be 6, like when we multiplied everything out. So this, to multiply to x squared, we need an x, and we need an x here. These two terms have to add to minus 5x, but in the end, these two have to multiply to 6. So here we're going to have a minus 2x and a minus 3x, and then this will be minus 2, and this one will be minus 3. So the box method is a little bit more of guess and check, but they all three kind of similarly, what adds here and multiplies here. What adds to negative 5x and multiplies to 6x. Back here, remember, it was adding to, or multiplying to 6 and adding to negative 5. So let's try another example. We have 4x squared plus 5x plus 1. So the AC method, we're going to do 4 times 1 is equal to 4. The factors of 4 that add to 5. So our factors of 4 are 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. So that has to be that the factors of 4 that add to 5 are 1 and 4. So we're going to do 4 plus 1 is equal to 5. 4 times 1 is equal to 4. So then we have 4x squared plus 5x plus 1. Now we're going to split up that middle term. So we're going to have 4x squared plus 4x plus x plus 1. Factor by grouping, we can take a 4x out of the first two terms. It's 4x. And we have x plus 1. And then plus, we can take only a 1 out of the second two terms. And we have x plus 1. So that factors in then to 4x plus 1 times x plus 1. Because I forgot to in the last slide, let's check our answer here, and then we'll do the other, we'll do the tic-tac-toe method. So multiplying this out, we have 4x plus 1 times x plus 1. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 1 is plus 1. X. Thinking ahead. 4x times 1 is 4x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times 1 is 1. So now we have 4x squared plus 5x plus 1. So it does check out, but let's do the tic-tac-toe method so we can see that method. Make our tic-tac-toe box. Four x squared goes here, 1 goes here, and we're going to add to 5x. So 4x squared times 1 is 4x squared. Then we want to multiply to 4x squared and add to 5x squared, so that will be 4x and x. And now we want greatest common factors for these four boxes. So the greatest common factor of 4x squared and 4x is 4x. The greatest common factor of 1 and 4x is 1. The greatest common factor of 4x squared and x is x. And the greatest common factor of 1 and x is 1. One thing I forgot to show you on the previous example is let's make sure everything multiplies correctly. So x times 4x is 4x squared. 1 times 1 is 1. X times 4x is 4x squared again. 4x times 1 is 4x. X times 1 is x. So it does all multiply together correctly. So our factoring is along our diagonals. Our factoring is then 4x plus 1 times x plus 1. In the box method, you would put in what we have. We have 4x squared and 1. And we want those two to add to 5x. So this is going to have to be, because this is going to have to be 4x. This is going to have to be x. So then when you start looking at this stuff, this is going to be 4x. This will be x. This will be 1. And that'll be 1. And it'll all multiply out together correctly. And I already checked my answer. Our next problem is 15y cubed minus 30y squared plus 33y. Again, remember the first step I told you was to factor out a greatest common factor if possible. These all are multiples of 3. The coefficients are all multiples of 3. And there's a y in every term. So we're going to factor out a 3y. And that will be 5y squared minus 10y plus 11 is what we're actually going to factor. The 5y squared minus 10y plus 11 is what we're going to factor using the AC method and the tic-tac-toe method. The 3y will keep along for the ride as when we write our final answer. So using the AC method, we're going to do 5 times 11, which is 55, and the factors of 55 that add to negative 10. Are there any factors of 55 that add to negative 10? The factors of 55 are 5 and 11 and 1 and 55. So there's no factors of 55 that add to negative 10. So 5y squared minus 10y plus 11 is not factorable. So the only thing that did factor out of this was the 3y. So our final answer is 3y times 5y squared minus 10y plus 11. And our check is still to remultiply. So 3y times 5y squared is 15y cubed. 3y times minus 10y is minus 30y squared. And 3y times 11 is plus 33y. The same thing would have happened in tic-tac-toe. We can see that quick. If we do, this was, we factored out a 3y, and we had 5y squared minus 10y plus 11. And with tic-tac-toe, we have 3y and y squared, or sorry, we have 5y squared. y squared and 11, and these need to add to negative 10y. This would have been 55y squared, and again, there's nothing that can multiply to 55y squared and add to negative 10y. So there's the inner part of it is not factorable. This is factored completely as is. Our next one is negative 3a squared plus 15ab minus 12b squared. It has two variables, but we can deal with that in both of our methods that we've been using. The first thing we want to do is take out a common factor. We can take out a negative 3 from everything. Remember, if this is negative, we want to take the negative out. So if we take out a negative 3, we have a squared plus 5ab. Oops, negative times negative is negative times positive is negative. We actually want this one to be minus 5ab. We want this to be minus 5ab because negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. And then plus 4b squared. Negative 3 times positive 4 is negative 12. Again, this negative 3 will be part of our final answer, but for right now, all we're going to factor is what's in the parentheses. So using the AC method, there's a 1 in front of the a squared times 4 equals 4. The factors of 4 that add to negative 5 are negative 1 plus a negative 4 equals negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. So then we split the middle term. We have a squared minus 5ab plus 4b squared. That splits, and we have a squared minus ab because that's the variables in the middle term, minus 4ab plus 4b squared. Factor by grouping, we can take an a out of the first two terms, and we have a minus b. We can take a minus 4 out of the 4b out of the second two terms, and again we have a minus b. Remember, negative times negative is positive. And now we combine like terms. So we have a minus 4b times a minus b. Our final factoring, we need that negative 3 in there, so the final factoring is going to be negative 3 times a minus 4b times a minus b. And to check our answers, we'll do this part first, so we'll leave the negative 3 outside. And then we have a times a is a squared, a times b is minus ab, minus 4b times a is minus 4ab, and minus 4b times minus b is plus 4b squared. Combine like terms, we have the negative 3 stays on the outside, a squared minus 5ab plus 4b squared, and then distribute the negative 3, and we have negative 3a squared plus 15ab minus 12b squared. In some versions, when some people are taught to do this, they're taught to ignore the b and then bring it back in at the end. Using the AC method, you don't need to ignore the b, it stays in there. And that'll also happen using the tic-tac-toe method. So this was our check, and this part right here was our check, and this part was our final answer. Now let's try the tic-tac-toe method and see how that works. Again, we're factoring out the negative 3, and we have a squared minus 5ab plus 4b squared. Tic-tac-toe method, we have the a squared here and the 4b squared here. Multiply across, we have 4a squared b squared, and these two need to multiply to, or add to minus 5ab. So we need to multiply to 4 and add to minus 5. That's going to be minus ab and minus 4ab. Then our greatest common factors, we have a squared and minus ab. Our greatest common factor is a. 4b squared and minus ab, that'll be minus b. A squared and minus 4ab, that's going to be a again. And 4b squared and minus 4b is minus 4b. Let's double check and make sure everything multiplies. A times a is a squared. Minus 4b times minus b is 4b squared. Minus 4a times minus ab is positive 4a squared b squared. A times minus b is minus ab, and a times minus 4b is minus 4ab. That all worked out, so our factoring is our diagonals. So our factoring was a minus b and a minus 4b, which is the same one we got the first time. And then don't forget that minus 3 is out front. Our last one is we want to add and subtract some more rational expressions. So before we had them factored, or there was not much factoring to do, this time we have to factor both the denominators to see what we need for a least common denominator. So x squared plus minus 15 x plus 56. This one I'll factor with the AC method. So that's 1 times 56 is equal to 56. The factors of 56 that add to minus 15 are minus 7 and minus 8 is minus 15. So we have x squared minus 7x minus 8x plus 56. We can factor x out of the first two terms and get x minus 7. Factor minus 8 out of the second two terms and have x minus 7. And then we combine like terms and we have x minus 8 and x minus 7. The second denominator is going to be, I will do that one doing the tic-tac-toe, just so we keep seeing different methods. We have x squared and minus 56, so multiplying those two together is minus 56x. And we want it to add to x. So the factors of minus 56 means we actually are going to end up subtracting the two numbers because that's negative. And they have to add to x, so that's going to be a positive 8x and a minus 7x. And minus 7x plus 8x is positive x, minus 7x times 8x is minus 56x. And now we can factor out greatest common factors. X and 8x, x squared and 8x, the greatest common factor is x. Minus 56 and 8x is going to be 8. X squared and minus 7x, the greatest common factor is x. Minus 56 and minus 7x, the greatest common factor is minus 7. Going along the diagonals, we have x minus 7 and x plus 8. So these two, when we have it factored, we have 5x over x minus 8, x minus 7 minus 4x over x minus 7, x plus 8. I'm going to leave it to you to check both of the factorings. And now I have to do some erasing. Our next steps for solving rational equations. The first thing we do is find the common denominator, which we just, the first thing we do is factor the denominators, which we just did. The second thing we do is find a common denominator. So one of our denominators is x minus 8, x minus 7. Our other denominator is x minus 7, x plus 8. So our least common denominator is going to be x minus 8, x minus 7, x plus 8. To do the addition, we need to multiply by what's missing. So the first fraction we're going to multiply by x plus 8 over x plus 8. The second fraction, we're missing x minus 8, so we're going to multiply by x minus 8 over x minus 8. Now we multiply out the numerators and combine like terms. So when we multiply this numerator out, we have 5x squared plus 40x. This is going to be, remember we want to distribute this negative, so we're going to make it a plus and make that a minus. So then we remember to distribute the negative. minus 4x times x minus 8 is going to be minus 4x squared plus 32, because minus 4x times minus 8 is plus 32. Now we have a common denominator, so we can leave it as a common denominator. And now we can combine like terms. So we have 5x squared minus 4x squared is x squared, and plus 40 plus 32 is going to be plus 72 over x minus 8, x minus 7, x plus 8. Factoring is one of those things you need to practice and practice and practice a lot to get good. Do the problems over and over until it really starts to make sense. Find a method that works for you and pick that method and consistently use that method. So if the AC method made sense to you, use the AC method. If the box method makes sense to you, I know I didn't show you that much box method, but if that makes sense to you, use the box method. If the tic-tac-toe method makes sense, use the tic-tac-toe method. If none of those methods make sense, look up and see if there's another method that might make sense to you. There are a lot of different methods out there. Find the one that makes sense and do that. That's it for today. We'll see.